Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of Capital City Matters. I'm John Landwehr. I used to be mayor and we used to cover some kind of civic things on this program, but now we've kind of morphed into more of a capital city statewide emphasis, and we've had some very interesting guests recently that are state leaders, elected officials, and other types of leaders. And today I'm very pleased to have with me Peter Hofherr. Peter is the chairman of the Wine and Grape Board for the state of Missouri. Peter, welcome.
Oh, pleasure to be here, John. Thank you.
I'm amazed at we're hearing so much more about Missouri wines. When I was younger and in the 70s and 60s, you just never heard much at all about Missouri wine, and if you were going to get a halfway decent bottle of wine, it had to be French or German. So what's happened?
Well, the world has changed. Wine is much more popular. The wine industry really has grown nationwide. When my mom and dad started St. James Winery in 1970, there were only a couple hundred wineries in the whole country. That's grown to over 8,000. And Missouri has seen that similar growth. We've gone from just a handful now to up to 120 wineries in Missouri.
Is part of it to do with the geography? In other words, if you go too far north or too far south, is the season not good for wine? How geographic is the issue?
Well, it's very geographic in this way. The best grapes grow in a climate that has very low humidity and has desert conditions where it's warm during the day and cool at night. But certain grapes adapt to the environment very well. And in Missouri, we're lucky to have some of those varietals that do very, very well in our hot, humid climate. So we're very lucky.
You mentioned the word varietals. What does that mean? And give me a couple examples.
Well, I mean, it's just, we have several varietals. The ones that you're probably familiar with are Cabernet, and those are vinifera. And Chardonnay would be another one. Well, those don't grow well in Missouri because of our winters, where it'll be 20 degrees one day and then 20 below the next day, and they can't stand that. But the grapes we do have, like Norton, Vignole, Vidal, and several other French hybrids are really, they're very good in this climate.
Now, your official title is chairman or executive director?
Chairman.
Chairman of the Wine and Grape Board. How long has there been a Wine and Grape Board at all in Missouri?
Well, the most recent version has been around since, I believe, 2005. But it goes back to Governor Teasdale when he saw the potential for Missouri wine and put an exploratory committee together. And then Governor Bond took the next step and really made it more of an advisory board within the Department of Ag. And then it went along in that route until under Governor Blunt, when then it was put into legislation as a Type 3 agency.
Now, you're still physically housed over at the Department of Agriculture, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, over on Missouri Boulevard.
Yes.
Good. You mentioned before we went on about a concept called agritourism.
Agritourism.
I have to admit, I'd never heard the term agritourism. Tell me about that.
Well, if you've ever been out to rural Missouri and picked something, in our numerous U-Pick operations, or spent the night in a B&B or one of the great restaurants, or visited a winery and vineyard, then you've participated in agritourism in our state. So agriculture, as you know, and tourism are our top two industry sectors in the state. It's really a combination of the two. So we see everything from corn mazes to U-Pick operations to micro distilleries, microbreweries, wineries. It all makes up the fabric of agritourism in the state of Missouri.
You mentioned microbreweries. I have a personal anecdote. My family, I grew up on a dairy farm in eastern Cole County, and Landwehr Dairy used to be up on Ash Street. My Uncle Louis started it with some other family members and was there for a long time. It was kind of like Central Dairy. They had a dairy bar and you could get ice cream and everything. Well, it went out of business in the 60s and the building was vacant, but I was very pleased a few years ago when Prison Brews came to be, and we now have Prison Brews, and we have another microbrewery down towards St. Mary's Hospital. So that whole concept of I'll call it homegrown, making your own things on site, and then the public seems very receptive to that.
They do. It's very place-based too. People really want to know where their food comes from, and they want to participate in it. It's about almost experiential hospitality, and we're seeing increased interest of that in the United States.
Now, you're a government agency, and but around town we have different events and things. There are some trade groups that are very. It seems like they have a lot of visibility, like the Missouri Vintners Association and the Missouri Grape Growers Association. Those are trade groups, private, non-governmental groups, right?
That's right.
Your group is government.
We're
right?
governor appointed, Senate confirmed.
So your meetings are open to the public, the Sunshine Law, and all those types of governmental things. What kind of staff do you have?
Well, at the Department of Ag, we have 3 or 4 staff. Depends what we have. Sometimes we have interns almost every year, but actually we're 5 with interns.
And I know you have a presence at the General Assembly. I was just visiting with you recently about some things that are going on. But how big a part is keeping the General Assembly in tune with some of your efforts? That's part of the job description, right?
Yeah, and it's a key part of why this industry's grown. 2 partnerships that have really helped this industry are the partnership with academia and the partnership with government, federal and state. So over the last 20 years, there have been numerous pieces of legislation and bipartisan efforts to really build this industry.
How does academia fit in?
Well, we happen to live in one of the parts of the country where growing grapes doesn't come naturally. It's not that desert situation we talked about. So there's lots of applied and basic research that has to happen here so that we can produce world-class quality. And Missouri State University and University of Missouri both are actively involved. The wine program itself is at the University of Missouri in Columbia.
I know just from hearing about Missouri wine, I sense that the industry has grown. Give me some facts and figures about how much wine is actually produced here now.
Yeah, we produce over 1 million gallons now. We have about 8% market share of all the wine sold in the state, and it's been increasing each year. So we have these wineries that are spreading out. They're in almost every county. It's much more than it was at the turn of the century before Prohibition, when we were only in 47 counties. Grape growers and wineries now are all over the state. So when people go to the wineries and they're used to the hospitality, they begin to look for the wine in their stores or buy it there. And it's just meant that the industry's been growing really fast, especially the last 5 years.
How successful have we been with getting folks in Kansas and Nebraska and Illinois to drink Missouri wine? Has it spread a little bit?
It sure has. My family's winery, we're distributed in 19 states, and the wine's been extremely popular. So the industry as a whole is a major player in Iowa, Kansas, Arkansas, and Illinois.
In terms of legislation, have there been some tax issues or some type of economic incentives, either directly or through our tax system? How has the General Assembly, other than just saying it's okay to have a winery in Missouri and be licensed, how has the legislation helped the industry grow?
Well, that's a great question. It has really 2 stages. The first stage is almost the survival stage. After Prohibition, the legislature was extremely restrictive on alcohol issues and almost anti-German in its approach. And it put a lot of legislative pieces in place that would inhibit any industry from coming back. And so when Stonehill started in '65, Mr. Held and my father would spend time in Jeff City. It was more Mr. Held. He was a board member at Farm Bureau, and he would drag my father with him. But they removed a lot of those laws so we could make over 5,000 gallons in a winery, numerous laws such as that. So, but lately, the last 10 years has been more of the incentive, as you referred to. It's been tax credits. It's been signs on the side of the road, the TOD program, which Senator Bentley from Springfield was very helpful in getting done.
Tell me what that stands for, the TOD program.
You know, I don't know. It's directional signs.
Oh, I see.
As you go down the highway, you'll see.
Oh, maybe tourist, something designation? Tourist?
You're probably a lot closer than I would be. I've always just referred to them as TOD signs. So.
Okay.
But it gave the winery visibility and the tourist information on where the wineries were, because not all of them were on the highway. So there have been numerous pieces of legislation, including funding. The program is funded by about $1.5 million a year from 12 cents a gallon tax.
Is your job considered full-time or not necessarily?
Well, Jim Anderson runs the executive director at the program, and I do whatever he asks as well as whatever my board asks. So there's an intersection between us, and we can spend a lot of time. In some weeks, I'll spend 2 or 3 days working on industry issues, and other weeks nothing. So overall, it's probably my job's probably a 15-hour-a-week job.
When I was mayor, you know, it's designed to be a part-time job, and the pay is commensurate with that part-time status. But you know, probably like you, there are some weeks where you maybe scratch your head and wonder whether it's really a full-time job.
Well, I'm just thankful that the winery and the folks at St. James are very supportive of growing the industry and working together with others, or I wouldn't be able to do this.
Good. Peter, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and cover a couple of historical issues, maybe a little talk about how the Germans came over here, or the French or the Italians, and decided this was an okay place to grow wine. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Peter Hofherr.
Don't be a dummy. Buckle your safety belt.
More than half of America's most important military decisions are made here. No, it's not the Pentagon or NORAD or the headquarters of Air Combat Command. It's the place that employs over 50% of our armed forces. It's where you work.
See you in a couple weeks.
So when your employees in the National Guard and Reserve need time off to serve, give them the freedom to protect ours.
Welcome back, everybody, to Capital City Matters. I'm John Landwehr, and I'm very excited about my guest today, Peter Hofherr from the Wine and Grape Board. Peter, welcome again.
Thank you.
I wanted to poke around on a couple of things we touched on during the first part. You grew up in St. James?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And you said that you recall your father with others coming to Jefferson City and maybe trying to get some legislation. How many in your family? How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have two brothers and a sister.
Okay. And what was it like growing up in the middle of a vineyard?
Well, you know, I thought everybody's family had a winery and vineyard growing up. And it was very rewarding, actually, because we made stuff with our hands, and I participated in the process with my father and my mother. It was a very small business, and so it was really the center of our family life.
Much like, you know, I mentioned before, I grew up on a dairy farm where, you know, everybody's involved. There aren't any lazy people on a farm.
No, they're not.
And so I bet that was a great experience. What types of grapes did your family grow?
We grow, we have about 13 varietals, and we also have an experimental vineyard on our place because a lot of the research was done on the East and West Coast. And since the industry hadn't existed since Prohibition, my dad brought in a lot of different grapes to see what would grow, and then started making research relationships with the University of Missouri to start the R&D there on the property. So it's all kinds of grapes. I mean,
Now, your father and mother started St. James Winery in 1970.
Yeah.
What do you think, what possessed them to do this?
Well, Dad actually was a beer guy. He was at Falstaff.
Okay.
And then he, in the early 60s, and he went out to UC Davis, retooled his skill set, because UC Davis is one of the top winemaking schools in the country. And you'll have to remember there were only a few hundred wineries at the time. And then came back and worked for a winery in St. Louis called Bordenhauer's, and then later Post in Arkansas, and then started St. James in '70. So it was in his blood. He just loved to make things.
It's just got to be rewarding well, like many agricultural experiences, but particularly with wine, I would think, because you have a crop that you can see mature, and then you harvest it and you process it, and really unlike many agricultural products, which you throw on a truck and take them to the local MFA elevator. Actually creating that product from beginning to end, it's got to be very rewarding.
You got to have a vision, and it's a very experiential journey, especially when you're growing the grapes and all the stuff that Mother Nature gives you, and then to express that in the wine with all the different options you have for winemaking. Before I came back, I was in corporate finance, and then I got the call from my mother, and you have to answer the call in my family or you get disinherited. So she, when I would tell people I was in corporate finance, there was no interest. The conversation at a party would die.
Yes.
But when you tell them that you have a winery, that's when the fun starts.
Excellent story. You talk about weather and Mother Nature, and we talked a little bit, the first part about you have to watch what you grow because Missouri is not Southern California. How has the drought this year affected the wine crop?
A lot of wineries are having a tough time. A lot of vineyards are, because they haven't invested in irrigation over the years, because it can run up to $1,000 to $2,000 an acre to put the systems in. But our family had been lucky, or we had the foresight to put in irrigation, fully irrigated. So for us, we had this very low humidity, which meant no disease pressure, and the grapes are fully ripe from all the sunshine that we've gotten. So it's a beautiful crop this year. And others are reporting that if they haven't irrigated, that it's really concentrated the flavors. And so I expect that all wineries this year will have superior juice coming down the pipe, and the wines will be wonderful from this vintage.
If you had to and it's probably not a fair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you had to characterize Missouri wine and try to contrast it maybe with French or German or California, what's the hallmark of Missouri wines?
They're very unique varietals. I mean, that's the hallmark. When you think of French or German or even wines from other regions around the country, you look for very specific reflections of the terroir or the geographic area in which the grapes are grown. Missouri has that. These unique varietals like Norton give us characteristics that you don't see in other parts of the world. Our geography here is very, very unique. Our weather patterns are unique, and I think our wines reflect that. So it's unique wines on almost a wine frontier that I think make this a different place than other parts of the world.
I was mentioning while we were off camera, Jefferson City has a partner city in Bavaria, southeast Germany, and I associate a lot of winemaking in Missouri with the Germans, maybe because of it's a strong tradition in Herman. And,
absolutely.
And Herman's was settled by Germans, but when you talk about the geography, the reason why I think a lot of Germans emigrated was because they were told accurately that the landscape is kind of like what they were used to, and I remember being on a bus in southeastern Germany, and if you ignored the German street signs and road signs, you would be driving down Highway 94 toward Herman. I mean, the rolling hills and the small plains, and then an occasional hill or a forest. And so it's really understandable how at least the Germans decided that this was a great place to be.
Yeah, the culture that they brought with them really helped propel the industry, and it's still the heart of the industry in that area. So everything from how wide those streets are, and the settlement society, and just the public relations that went on really helped propel the Missouri wine industry to the largest in the United States and one of the larger wine producing regions in the world before Prohibition.
Well, of course, now as the wineries have grown, but some of the earlier versions of the wineries, as they started out, your family would be an example. There's something called that German work ethic, and you know, you had 4 children in the family, and they probably all participated.
Yes, we had no choice. One time during harvest, we had worked about 12 hours, and I had a date that night, and I asked my father, can I go and leave and go to the date? And my dad said, you've only worked 12 hours. That's half a day. Do you really want to be one of those half-a-day guys?
Excellent. Is your father still with us? Father and mother still?
My mother is, unfortunately. My father died in --
Oh, I'm sorry. But the winery is going strong. I know that.
Yes.
Do you when you're not in Jefferson City performing duties with the board, is that your full-time occupation?
It is.
The winery?
And I also worked some at the University of Missouri. I'm involved with the agriculture economics faculty. I've been trying to finish a PhD for numerous years.
Well, when you mentioned coming back to the winery after you were in corporate finance, that's probably a pretty good marriage when you think about it, because wineries are very inspirational and hard work and fun, but they are economic animals, and they've got to work economically.
They're tough because you have an agricultural operation, a manufacturing, a wholesale, a retail. Some people are doing online and export. You have all these different businesses, all with different cultures, cash cycles. It is actually a pretty challenging business, and the equipment is very expensive, like the dairy industry.
How has the internet influenced the market?
No, greatly. Information is democratized information for the consumer, so they can get a lot more information. Wineries can now project their images out and their brands out around the world. So it has really changed the way that the industry works.
How difficult is it? I know that the wineries, I presume, are regulated by the it's got a new name. It used to be the liquor control.
It did.
But now it's alcohol, tobacco, and liquor or something.
It's at the federal level, it's TTB.
Okay. How hard is it for if somebody in New York to order a bottle of wine or a case from St. James Winery?
Well, New York's a little tougher because there are laws. Because the constitutional amendment that repealed Prohibition gave the right to regulate alcohol to the states. So you see a patchwork of state laws, and this patchwork really it develops depending on the power of the wholesaler and the power of the supplier. So you'll see different laws in different states depending on who has the power in the legislature. Excuse me.
So it varies from state to state.
Absolutely.
But there are states, and in other words, does St. James Winery, does it accept internet orders from those states where that's allowed?
Yeah, we ship all over the country where it's legal to do so.
Have the French been open to the idea of having a bottle of Missouri wine,
Yes.
or are they too sophisticated for that?
No, one of the big claims to fame for Missouri is France had a phylloxera outbreak in the 1870s, and C.V. Riley and a couple Missourians started sending rootstock over, which they grafted their vines on and saved the industry. So that really, in Montpelier, you'll see a statue that really tells the Missouri story about its relationship to the French industry. Not only that, but also southern Missouri is one of the best barrel areas in the United States. So you see a lot of French actually coming over, looking at the coopers that we have down there in Lebanon and Cuba, Missouri, and looking at the oak barrels. So it's very international in the wine industry in this state.
You mentioned oak barrels. Do you still use oak barrels with your wine?
Absolutely.
Are any parts of the industry abandoning that and going to stainless steel?
Well, we use both.
Use both?
And a lot, the oak barrels are very expensive. They can run from 500 to 800 a piece. So you have to be able to have the price points. Consumer has to pay a little bit more to make sure you have the margins you need to stay in business if you're going to use oak barrels.
Get out your crystal ball a little bit, Peter, and tell me where you would like to see the industry be in 5 or 10 years, and maybe what the General Assembly or the department or your board, what buttons could be pushed in order to, there's been a great deal of success, but you seem like the type of fellow that doesn't want to sit around and rest on his laurels. What do you see the industry being in 5 to 10 years, and what can your board and the General Assembly do to make it happen?
Well, I think that in the next 10 years, you'll see Missouri go from an 8% market share probably up to, I would say, 12 or 13% at a minimum.
Now that market share, real quick, is that number is the percentage of Missouri wine purchased in Missouri that is made in Missouri? Is that number?
Yeah, it's all the wine sold in the state.
In the state, okay.
And it's a percentage of all that wine. It's Missouri wine
Excellent.
that's sold.
It's now 8%.
It's 8%.
But you think we could get up to 12 or 13?
At a minimum. And I think it's going to be driven by this local foods movement, this experiential hospitality that we're talking about. Missouri wines now, with the quality that we're achieving and the strategic partnerships that we're growing, are becoming more of a staple of everyday Missourians' lives. And so as that happens, much like the French have found, the per capita consumption goes up, and wine is treated as a food for their everyday events, whether they're celebrating or whatever they're doing. And so the local wineries, your local winery down the street is going to benefit from that. So I think that strategic partnerships with the university system will grow. I think that we'll see a lot more work on the finance side that will be a better credit for a lot of the banks. And I also think that you'll see the strategic partnerships with all the agriculture groups to grow agritourism in our state.
Excellent. So the future looks potentially rosy for us.
Well, every future scenario has challenges, but you know, like my dad said, you don't stop at 12 hours. You just keep going until you get it done.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Peter, it's been a real pleasure. You know, and I had this wild thought that maybe we need to come and do this again, and get a couple of folks and bring a couple of Missouri wines, if we can do that on campus. Yeah, I'll check it out, and have a little mini wine tasting, and maybe get 5 or 6 different varieties, and get some folks to sip little samples and let you talk about that variety they're experiencing.
So that'd be wonderful.
Let's think about that. Peter Hofherr, Chairman of the Wine and Grape Board, thank you so much for coming.
A pleasure.
Viewers at home, thank you for spending another half hour with us. Watch out for the next show. It'll be another interesting one. Take care.